A story is told of two women fighting over ownership of a newborn baby. So fierce is the fight over who is the mother of the child that it lands at the feet or the court of the king. The king tries to persuade them to no avail. So I say, fine, this is my decision. You hold there, hold one hand of the baby, and you hold the other hand of the baby. We're going to split the child into two. You go with your half. One woman said, no, in that case, let the other woman take the child. And the king quickly says, you are the mother of the child. Go with your child. It has since come to be known as Solomonic wisdom. Raila Odinga has now moved to the Supreme Court. Regardless of the weight of the case, the Supreme Court is called upon to make a decision. And the decision is simple. Whether to confirm Ruto's victory or otherwise. The Supreme Court is therefore, in my view, in a position to deliver that Solomonic wisdom. Because like I've said before, most recently on Saturday, in a video I released, the Supreme Court was created deliberately to be a court beyond a court. A court that is not bound by law in the narrow sense in which other courts would be bound by the law. A court that can make law more than the other courts. A court that can disregard precedents, that can even overrule and ignore its own decisions. A court with original jurisdiction. Now, in order to understand where I'm heading, ask yourself this. How was it possible that the framers of the Constitution gave 14 days in which a presidential petition should be processed and judgment delivered? Is it really possible for a court to hear a presidential petition and render judgment within 14 days? If you begin from that point, then you can begin to realize that this court is not an ordinary court. In my humble thinking, the Supreme Court is supposed to have a bird's view of an election. That from where you sit as the wise men and women entrusted such a heavy responsibility by Kenyans, not entangled and tied by the usual procedures and laws of other courts. Can you tell Kenyans whether this election was free and fair to the extent they can proceed, or you can overturn the victory of a president-elect? Surely, in 14 days, it cannot be that the Supreme Court was expected to hear arguments, examine it with evidence, and arrive at a decision. Never. It was not possible. Even for those who are arguing through a constitutional amendment that it should be 30 days, I find it laughable. 30 days are not enough for a Supreme Court to process a presidential petition in the manner in which courts process petitions. It's not enough. So 14 days are enough. Because the Supreme Court was not intended to have an ordinary hearing wise men and women, a bird's view of the situation on the ground, and on the basis of that view, render judgment. It cannot be, therefore, that if Raila comes with evidence, Ruto's victory will be overturned merely on the weight of the evidence. No. Neither can it be that Raila will not get his way merely because his evidence is scanty. These Kenyans must understand this. And I'm sure the Supreme Court does understand the same. Courts do not operate in a vacuum. They look at the situation in the country, the public mood, the public good. A good example, 2012 or thereabouts, people moved to court, first challenging IBC, then court, to argue, in my view rightly so, that Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and William Samoei Ruto should not run for office, given that they were facing the most serious of international crimes, that the two were indictees of the ICC, that the international community was telling Kenyans, you cannot elect people like this into office. And many Kenyans agreed. If for nothing else, but for the mere fact that with the weight of ICC on your back as president and deputy, you cannot deliver the people of Kenya. You cannot deliver your promises to the people of Kenya. Why did everybody push the case to the next person until finally the judicial told us you cannot stop them? It's not true that you couldn't stop them. There were enough laws to stop Uhuru and Ruto from running for office. It was public interest that IBC and the judiciary were considering. You can imagine a situation you could find yourself in as a country if the courts or IBC had stopped Ruto and Uhuru from running in 2013. You would create more problems than you are trying to solve. And therefore, back to the Supreme Court. It's never really about the weight of the case or otherwise. Therefore, I invite you to look at the possible implications of either overturning or maintaining Ruto's victory. I begin by overturning the victory. And for a moment, ignore this issue of recount, because it's very tricky. Let's just do the most obvious, that you overturn the victory and people go for a rerun. Why would this appear to be attractive? Looking at the general mood in the country. First, the votes show that the country is divided into two. At 7 million and 6.9 million, both of them are at 7 million. 50-50. Look at the mood in the country since the announcement of the election. The country doesn't seem to be celebrating victory. Not that somebody has not won, somebody has won. It shows a big part of this country has reservations about the victory and are actually unhappy about it. Just as the other side is happy they have won, but almost ashamed to celebrate their victory. So if you nullify this election and order recount, order repeat election, call a rerun, is like in football, where 90 minutes are over 30 minutes extra time is over, and you go to penalties. A winner is decided in a way nobody can talk about a referee. Nobody can talk about anybody being bought. No. Because you are given, it's you and the goalkeeper. You knock, it goes over the bar. The other guy puts one inside. It goes on until your last chance. That if you miss this one, the other guy is declared the winner of the match. Na goalkeeper anashika mpira yako. You cry as you go away, but you don't blame anybody. That to me would be the advantage of a rerun in a closely contested election such as this. Why again will it be attractive? Because if Raila claims that Ruto has robbed his election through rigging and cheating and fraud, that argument ceases, because rigging an election cannot be a one-day event. You cannot plan to execute rigging or cheating in an election on the election day or the counting day or the transmission session. No. Cheating in an election is a process that must start from far. So if it is true Ruto would have rigged this election, cheated in this election, he must have taken time to plan and execute it. So if you give him 60 days, he will not have the time. And therefore, if he beats you, your claim about rigging is out. He didn't rig in the first election. He has won clean because he didn't have the time to plan. 60 days are not enough. Moreover, I expect the Supreme Court not just to nullify an election like I've said, but to point out a certain mistakes the IEBC made and order that those mistakes be corrected before the repeat election. On the other hand, if Raila Amolo Odinga wins this election, it will show it was true there were games that were played earlier on. Because how can somebody who won so comfortably, not necessarily come in terms of numbers, then do so poorly? It would prove indeed Raila had won, but his election had been stolen. So that path of a rerun, it may be very uncomfortable to some people. But if you look at it in the bigger context of the country and the public good, public interest, you begin to see if we had this, because I'm talking about the options. Because now we are faced, those are the options we have. I'm not creating them. So the option of a rerun, you can see, appear to be more attractive. Let's go the other side. If you do not nullify this election, for whatever reason, and remember, I'm not talking about the merits or the substance of the case, but that is not important in a Supreme Court. These are judicious men and women applying Solomonic wisdom with a free hand, elbow room to do that within the context of our Constitution. If you do not nullify the election, you confirm Ruto's victory. First, you can see one half of the country will remain as gloomy as the country is today. Number two, and I've said this before, people will be so disillusioned, the level of apathy you'll witness in coming elections. Because watu wanasema mimi sitapiga kura tena, kama tunapiga inaibiwa. Because regardless of what the Supreme Court says, people will feel the election was stolen. We had 15 voting in 2017, we have 14. Next election will be below 10 million. And then like that, like that. But worse, there's a possibility that people could react, having given up on the Supreme Court, looking at 2013, 2017, and say this Supreme Court cannot help us. So they could react in the so-called peaceful demonstrations. But the worst, more than that, is that you'll be having a population of people with the pent-up grievances, people who are boiling inside them. No country can be happy and safe if half of its population is dying from inside, because an opportunity could erupt, could present itself, and this pent-up anger could erupt and destroy the country. And therefore, If there's a way the men and women could offer us almost like a middle path, where is a win-win situation, in which at the end of the process, the country settles. Even as somebody is installed at State House, those who didn't support him can at least settle in one way or the other. And therefore, in my considered opinion, the Supreme Court finds itself in a very challenging situation. But lucky for them, they have the power, they have the law behind them, they have the Constitution, they have the wisdom of experience. This is the third or fourth petition before them. The first, those judges who are in the Supreme Court during the first petition in 2013 are there. Their colleagues who have joined them later have been judges in this country. They understand the mood in the country, and therefore they will render judgment that Kenyans will benefit from.